A boy in Hackney chases a ball across a crater where a house once stood. In Lambeth, a woman hangs laundry beside the ruins of a wall blackened by smoke, while just down the road, a power station hums through the morning fog. On the docks of Tower Hamlets, dockers shout over the clang of cargo as steam rises from teapots in homes with no indoor plumbing. In Ealing, roses bloom quietly behind picket fences, and in Brent, you can still hear birdsong between the new council estates and the last patches of open field. This was London in the 1950s, a city still healing from war, but alive with motion. 5 boroughs, each carrying its own weight of loss, memory, and hope. They weren't the polished neighbourhoods you might know today. Back then, they were raw, real, and full of life. And if you've ever wondered what they truly looked and felt like, this is the story that brings them back. In the 1950s, Lambeth stood at a crossroads between history and industry. On one side, the centuries-old Lambeth Palace watched over the Thames, its Gothic silhouette a quiet witness to change. Just a few blocks away, power stations pumped smoke into the sky, and the smell of coal dust mixed with the river's breeze. It was a borough where royalty and working class lived side by side, separated by stories, not geography. The streets echoed with footsteps and resilience. Children played chase around piles of bricks left from wartime destruction, and mothers leaned over garden fences, exchanging the day's news with cups of tea in hand. Terraced houses sat shoulder to shoulder, patched but proud, though many still bore scars from the Blitz. Families made homes out of rubble and hope. Lambeth Walk was more than just a street. It was a spirit. Its name still lingered in people's mouths, sung softly or hummed without thinking. Even if the shops were worn and the cobblestones uneven, it was a place where stories began. It wasn't elegant, but it was alive. By the mid-50s, council-built estates began rising where Victorian terraces once stood. These low-rise homes with small gardens hinted at a future far from cramped city rooms. Neighbours swapped recipes, helped with childcare, and repaired broken windows together. Life might have been modest, but it was fiercely collective. Every doorstep was both a home and a handshake. Lambeth in the 1950s wasn't easy, but it was full of people who didn't give up. The smell of the river, the clang of the trains, and the laughter of kids skipping rope under smog-grey skies. These were the sounds of a borough still beating strong. And visionaries like Ted Hollamby began planting the first seeds of what Lambeth would one day become. What's your clearest memory of Lambeth in those days? Hackney was still healing in the 1950s. Bomb craters remained like missing teeth between houses, and temporary shelters lined streets where grand homes once stood. But life didn't wait for perfect conditions. People moved forward, holding on to routine like a rope, pulling them through each day. Markets kept the borough with life. Ridley Road bustled. Vendors shouted prices, children dodged between stalls. The smell of fish and onions filled the air. It was more than a shopping street. It was where neighbours met and where the world felt close, even if homes were broken. In the background, new cultures began to integrate. Jewish stallholders were joined by Caribbean families offering plantains and early reggae records. Eastern European accents blended into back-alley chatter. Hackney began humming with a wider, richer rhythm. Shops and pubs became more welcoming. Many refused to discriminate by race, offering life-changing normality in a divided time. Peddlers sold produce, and news spread quickly through warm crowds. That sense of inclusion mattered. Local groups stepped up. Women organised meetings for better housing, and youth football games found space in bomb-scarred playgrounds. Families pushed back against hate rallies, insisting on belonging, even before the world was ready to agree. By the end of the decade, Hackney's identity was firmly resolute. Battered, but rebuilding. No grand towers, no fancy facades, just a community choosing to stay, to grow, to repair. Hackney pulsed with survival. The postman, the greengrocer, the corner shop owner. They were all part of the fabric. It was a borough of second chances and slow rebirth, one that looked ordinary but was building something extraordinary from the ground up. Have you shared a hot bag of crisps with friends under the flickering street lamps? Ealing in the 1950s felt like a dream gently waking after the war. Rows of red brick homes stood neatly behind low garden walls, bicycles leaned against fences, and children rode scooters down wide leafy streets. It was a borough defined by rhythm and routine, the kind that wrapped its residents in quiet comfort. Shops along Uxbridge Road sold everything from fresh bread to wool thread. On weekends, families picked up the newspaper, the bakery loaf, and returned home for roast dinners. From open windows, you could hear silverware clinking and radios humming with tunes that everyone recognised. Ealing Studios, the world's oldest working studio, was thriving. In the post-war era, it produced beloved comedies and dramas, The Lavender Hill Mob, The Man in the White Suit, giving the borough creative pride and a touch of glamour. They even had about 50 crews working round the clock at times. Local cafes buzzed with stories of extras spotted in films and actors grabbing tea around the corner. There was a spark in the air, even among ordinary lives. The borough became part of British cinema's golden age. Church bells marked mornings, while schoolyards echoed with chants. It felt safe, like kindness had a place in the everyday. Even while new council estates began to grow and the first immigrant families settled, Eling adjusted with grace. The charm of Eling wasn't excitement. It was the balance maintained between old and new, quiet and bright. For those who grew up there, afternoon teas and flower beds became lifelong memories. Did your Sunday mornings begin with hymns and your evenings with a walk down Ealing Broadway? In 1950s, Tower Hamlets, the dock still ruled the borough. Massive cargo ships from Africa, Asia and the Americas offloaded sugar, tea, tobacco and people. The air carried salt, coal dust, diesel fumes and the aroma of fish frying on street corners. Homes were cramped, many terraces had no indoor plumbing, and bomb-damaged buildings still stood half-collapsed. But community thrived in the cracks. Washing lines became bridges, and pubs offered refuge against the cold evenings. New migrants enriched life further. Jewish families long had deep roots here, but by mid-decade, Bangladeshi and Caribbean newcomers were settling too. Kitchens began to smell of curry and calypso, and corner shops stocked both bagels and plantains. Culture mixed quietly but firmly. Work was exhausting and days long. Dockers told tales of distant lands, while mothers juggled jobs, school runs and home cooking. The Thames connected them to the empire's edges even when they never left their street. By decade's end, change was obvious. Post-war bomb sites cleared, docks decayed, and gentrification whispers loomed. Yet the people, rooted in determination, stood firm, reshaping identity through shared struggle. Tower Hamlets was a place where different worlds collided in everyday life. It wasn't polished, but pulsed with pride, with doors open and tables shared. What smell, sound or street name still brings you back to Tower Hamlets? In the early 1950s, Brent still breathed the air of the countryside. Small farms, green patches and hedgerows framed old cottages, and animals roamed freely, cows in Kingsbury, chickens behind sheds in Wembley. It was the edge of London, yet it felt like another world. This tranquil setting began to shift as post-war pressures stirred plans into action. By mid-decade, the landscape transformed. Developers replaced fields with streets, homes and estates like Chalk Hill, Stonebridge and South Kilburn, bringing indoor plumbing, tiled fireplaces and gardens. These new council estates offered families long-awaited comfort. Children played on cul-de-sacs, while parents planted their first roses, enjoying a space they could finally call their own. Community life flourished around new shops and local markets, like Preston Road Parade and Ealing Road. Bus routes stretched farther. New schools echoed with laughter. In Gladstone Park, kids rolled down hills while the trees stood in quiet recovery from the Blitz. And as families settled, the borough's heart opened to the world. From the Caribbean to India, from Pakistan to Ireland, new voices and rhythms began to shape Brent. Reggae and Irish folk shared space with Bhangra and Tylids. Temples, churches, mosques and chapels rose side by side. The Empire Windrush generation brought steel drums and style, while Irish builders laid down brick and roots. By the late 50s, Brent was no longer fields. It was a living mosaic, held together by hard work, resilience, and the dream of a better future. Did you help your mum plant tulips in the garden, or try your first curry from a neighbour's kitchen? Sometimes all it takes is a smell. The smoke from a chimney, freshly baked bread from the corner store, the sound of church bells or a bus engine to bring it all back. The 1950s were not easy, but they were real. Built on courage, kindness and quiet pride. Each neighbourhood had its own rhythm, its own face, its own history, and somehow they all formed the London that still lives inside so many hearts. If you've walked those streets, heard those sounds, or just grown up listening to someone who did, then you know it wasn't just the past. It was part of who we are, and it's worth remembering. If this video brought back any memories, made you smile, or stirred something deeper, remember to subscribe. Here we honour the stories that have touched us. We'd love to hear yours. Share a street name, a moment from your childhood, a family ritual, anything that brings you back to the London of those days. Because the more we remember, the more we'll keep it alive.